Okay, can I have your attention? I am Martin Toma. I'm the city administrator, and I'm here on behalf of the mayor, who has to work for a living, unfortunately. I don't remember how long ago it was that Victoria visited our town and talked to the mayor and me and Sandra about her goal. And a lot of things come up over the years. People say they're going to do things, they're going to try things. We try to be supportive of whatever anybody wants to do. It's the interest of calling attention to our town. Victoria came in and we said, yes, we will support you. And then, maybe something happens and maybe it didn't. Well, it did. Here she is. Tom, Victoria, halfway to their goal. And I am pleased that she's made it. I hope she enjoys her stay in our fine town. And this is the first grade class from St. Jen, and they're going to sing a song. And then Victoria's going to make some comments that you'll all enjoy, I am sure. Thank you for your attention.
Where we can not only share with you stories, but also hear more from you about why you make a home here. Thanks.
Well, thank thank you for being here with us this evening. I guess yeah. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is really a pleasure to have Victoria and her husband Tom here with us. As you have read in the paper and no doubt are informed because you're here, she is making a journey all the way from the headwaters of the Mississippi River all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And we are just about the halfway point here.
You are.
We've been so glad to have her here in our community for 2 days. And I know that she's enjoyed getting to know people while she was here. And I know she's going to enjoy telling you a little bit about her project and her experiences. So, Miss Victoria Bradford Sterbecki.
Yeah, very good. Very close. Sterbicki. It's Polish. It's hard to say. I married a Polish man, and I chose to take his name. What complications. So thank you all for being here. As Sandra said, I'm Victoria Bradford Sterbicki, and my husband and I are traveling the 2,400-ish miles from the headwaters to the Gulf of Mexico. We're hopping over several times the river in order to intersect with all 10 states that border the river. Minnesota and Louisiana, the only 2 states that are integral to the river, where it is going through the states. And my home state and his home state, which is kind of nice. We're on this trek, on this pilgrimage, to listen very deeply to the people and the land along this path. It is a performance of listening, a practice of listening as we spend time with people and share time with the mayor like we did yesterday and other citizens here in the community and other communities upriver of here, and we will do further downriver. And then gather those stories, gather those voices of the river and share them as we travel further and further downriver and into the future as this work progresses. Tonight within our small group that we have gathered here, I don't want to go on super long in terms of sharing a bunch of stories, which sometimes we do when we're in, a bigger thing. But I really want to focus on you, on hearing from you and hearing why you might be here, why you might make a home here in St. Genevieve. That's kind of the crux, is understanding why do people make a home in the place that they're in today in 2019. There's a lot of rich history in this place, in a lot of the places along the Mississippi, but obviously there is a present and potentially a future that is held in this place that is St. Genevieve, and you're a part of that. And so I'm trying to understand through this work, through this journey, what is that story? What is the story of today and the story of tomorrow? Through the context of obviously the past as well. So I thought that, should we just share one story, 2 stories? What do you think?
Which stories are you thinking of? Sally Fine Day or?
Well, you know one story.
Louisiana?
No, you know Terry.
Terry, we got to share Terry's story.
Right, but what? Should I share a journey story or should I share a person story?
Maybe let's share Terry's story. I think this is a small enough group. It would really be nice to share his story and then reach out to learn their stories.
Good, that's perfect. I gotta always, teleconference here with the spouse to get the feedback.
She's the artistic director.
Every time we're in a different community, we share different stories that we've heard upriver, just like we will share stories from St. Genevieve as we travel downriver. Depending upon the group that we're with, we choose different stories. And one story we always like to share is the very first story that we heard on the river, the very first person we met, because this is a relay of voices, of individual voices of people that we have interacted with. So we met this man named Terry Larson. He is in his mid-60s, and he was born and raised in Itasca Township. He now lives on Wolf Lake, some 30 or 40 miles away, still along the Mississippi River. His family land, called Gulfsvig Landing, remains an important fixture of his and his family's life at Itasca. He's often considered the first man of the river, okay? And he has been written about and interviewed many, many times before. But when you're with him, the sentiment and feeling feels authentic and true. He launched our time together speaking of his family history and land as we met right upon it. And he wandered into a more personal story of his experience with injury, how it changed his life to suffer and overcome pain, with much thanks to the river itself. Almost immediately, in telling us these stories, he wandered into the narrow stretch of what he called the Mississippi, this tiny stream there at Gulfsvig Landing, to fetter out what he thought was a glass bottle containing a handwritten message. In the end, this turned into something of a science lesson, an excursion that had him showing us precious freshwater sponges growing on the rocks beneath the surface that he plucked off for us to keep for our research. Right? Tom held out his arm so as not to slip as Terry climbed out of this cleanest part of our great river.
Want me to get up? Oh, okay.
And from there, we began our recordings and made our way down through the Gulfsvig land to his most special spot for a blessing, some foraging, a poem of majestic dying, and many, many more stories on the day. Nearly 4.5 hours later, we had traveled many circles together, finding ourselves right in the middle of it all. A lesson from Ojibwe guide Azawindib that Terry shared with us. Apparently, he once said to the explorer Schoolcraft in his search to find the source of the Mississippi, "Why is the white man so intent on finding the beginning and the end of everything, when it is the middle that truly matters?" And so I thank you for being in the middle of this, the very middle of this with us, helping us to hear and listen and process all that we've heard upriver and be prepared for what we will experience further downriver. We hope that you will share with us now why you are here, why St. Genevieve is your home, because that is why we are here, to spend time with you. Can we go around and just introduce ourselves so we have a sense?
If you don't have an outstanding warrant.
Right. Nobody's
make
in
up
witness
the
protection, right? Okay.
Well, I'm John. Should I go on?
Yeah, go on.
And, my family's from, my last name's Kurtz, and I didn't realize my family was here, so when I got down here, I was living out towards Festus and Crystal City, and I moved down here and found out that my family was from here, and then I couldn't seem to get myself away from it. I'm stuck here. So, it's just, I don't know, I can't explain it. I can't.
It's a feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
No other place, you feel like you're a part of something, and whether some other people believe that or not, I believe the Lord put me here to keep me within my family, of origin of my family, and I think that He kept me here for that reason, just to show me that what my family was like when they lived together. That's what keeps me here.
So have you really reconnected with the history and?
Slowly.
Yeah.
It's really hard to stay with the history because I wasn't practicing it, but I found out that my great-great-great-great-grandfather was John Kurtz, and the same name as I have.
Yeah.
And really familiar with like the church, the Catholic Church, which I'm not Catholic, but my family all this, But I don't really think, I don't know if they would really call this, I guess this is just like a religious town. It's kind of a religious town, where it only stays one way. That's what they want it to be, the way they want it to be. And you try to change it, they don't accept change. They like to keep it the way it is.
The mayor might have an opinion on
Mayor
that.
might have a different opinion. But,
No.
so, John, before we move on, people have to say who they're voting for tonight. Is it Valley or St. Jen, right?
Oh, the
And some of you are
football.
probably going off to the game after this, so we want to be respectful of that.
I would
But
have to say,
who do you want to see win tonight?
St. Jen.
St. Jen. Okay, there we go. I'll get my pen out, I'll log that.
Yeah,
So there's one St. Jen,
there you go.
Valley 0.
Well, my name is Paul. Got to meet Victoria, had a great conversation yesterday, and talked a lot about my life. And I am transplanted here in St. Genevieve, but I've never ever been more than probably a mile and a half away from the river. Even growing up in South St. Louis, I remember a lot of times we spent a lot of time with my dad to the river and the riverfront. There's a park up there called Bell Reef Park, and it sits over the top of the river. And and even my dad, even as a child, he grew up near Anheuser-Busch, and he but he was always spent a lot of time on the river. So the river's always been in my blood my whole life, and little did I know that I would even pursue a career on the river. So I work on the water every day of my life, and it's just been an incredible journey. And like I say, I told you yesterday, it's just the river is, to me, it's when I first got hired on in my job, my boss said, he said, either you'll love it or you'll hate it. And I tell that to people all the time because I hire on because it's a love or a hate. It consumes you to the point that you love it, or it'll drive you away because of what it is that you have to do on it.
And you said you might never retire, so obviously
I love what I'm doing. I love
it's
working.
consumed you.
I always make fun of my boss that because you know he's retired now, but I'd have to work some weekends, and he'd always be sitting down there looking at the river, having a cup of coffee on a weekend when he could be home. But I find myself doing the same thing. On a weekend, I'll go down to the port, and I'll always gravitate back to the river. You know, and it just in the flood we had here this year, I spent time walking the levee and trying to help protect the town from the river, but have a lot of respect for the river, and I respect the people that had to fight the river all through the ages. It amazes me that this town still stands because I know what the floodwaters can do. And right now we have a big, beautiful levee that protects us, but just south of us, there's people lose things because of the river. You'll see that as you go down the river.
Yeah.
You're gonna hear stories of devastation. You know,
Yeah.
farmers that their fields are, like I told you yesterday, their fields this year we couldn't plant. But when it dries out, because of that beautiful river and that silt that was in there, it's going to be
all the more fertile, right?
Fantastic. It's going to
Yeah.
be fantastic. And I do, and I like I say, I've transplanted from St. Louis to Bloomsdale, then been in St. Genevieve for 15 years, and I just love it. And I never ever really appreciated the history of this town until I moved into St. Genevieve, and then really the lesson I got when I became mayor has just been incredible because of the amount of people that I've been able to meet, and the historians and all the things that go on, helping fight to preserve the history, and because not everybody appreciates the history of this town, and it's tough, you know, but it is, it's worth fighting for, and because there's a story to tell. It's a story to tell, and it's going to be somebody else is going to be sitting here 100 years from now talking about that story, talking about who was here before us. So it's kind of cool. So, enough said. Yeah. You're up. Oh, who's going to win? It's going to be a tie tonight. Tie.
Well done, Mayor.
Tie tonight. Yeah.
Very diplomatic. Yeah.
I would say I wouldn't even know what you're talking about. You know, our kids been out of school for so long, you know, they're got their kids and grandkids, but I wanted to ask, where would you say your hometown was from? I have no way of knowing.
Sure. I'm from a small town in the heel of the boot of Louisiana, the state of Louisiana, coastal Louisiana. So basically, I grew up all along coastal Louisiana. My mom is from the toe of the boot, and we grew up visiting my grandmother and my cousins all there in the tendrils where the land is receding. Well, I mean, all the land is receding, honestly. But my father is from Baton Rouge, and his family is from New Orleans. My father grew up in Baton Rouge on the Mississippi. So my life has just been there in coastal Louisiana. Close to the river and in the waterways that are connected to the river, you know, whether it's swamps, inlets, bayous, lakes, all the kinds of waterways. My mom told me as a young person, we are water people.
Are you Cajun?
I'm Cajun, yeah. Yep. And so her father was a trapper. Started a company with his brother-in-law where they built boats originally, and then they started providing the labor to the oil rigs off the coast of Louisiana and the Gulf of Mexico, and now off the coast of Africa. They still have the company, and so there's this kind of interesting conflict. Many of my cousins work in the oil industry, but also are fishermen. And in the world of Louisiana natural resources, we have a competing set of natural resources that work against each other, whether it's the fisheries or the oil world. that are, you know, harming, one is harming the other. And I've learned about that over the years and felt it from a distance as I spent 10 years in Chicago as an artist working on my profession, and felt the need that I need to be a part of that and reconnect and, you know, give back to my home place. So this project is a big part of doing that in a way that's more extended, that's really trying to understand the lineage of my home place, where the Mississippi River connects to many people and many other people's home places along that river that feed into my place. And that tells a story, a much bigger story than my own story, that's very important to understand, and that would help me understand my own story in the long run. So that's how this project kind of took shape.
If you were Paul and my ages, or I probably got you by a couple years, 20. A boy's always attracted to the water. You know, I lived where Mississippi, Missouri came together. That's where I was born and raised. Up there, they call it Spanish Lake, you know. So it was always the water, you know. Relatives of mine that lived in St. Charles were boat builders. In fact, during I think it was the Second World War, they were trying to make bridges on pontoon boats. Well, they had built the flat bottom Mississippi River boats, what they call them John boats, big ones. Got a big contract with the government. We were all going to be rich, the whole family. But a guy by the name of Henry Kaiser figured out a way to stamp these boats out of aluminum. And never went the process. That's the only story I can come up with.
That's awesome.
Who was Henry Kaiser in the first place? I never heard of him, but anyway.
He made a fortune.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
How'd you find your way down to St. Genevieve?
Children moved down here. We wanted to be near them. So then, as soon as we got down here, a year later, they went to Cape Girardeau. So yeah, it's up and down, you know.
Sure.
St. Genevieve, we just moved in here 14 years ago. The people that aren't here, we could talk about. They do so much. And I can name off 6 people that I've run into that's always present at everything that goes on in town. They are always there, you know. They stay in the background. But I can name off Jack and Patty and Bill and just names, you know, and everybody knows who I'm talking about, you know. But there are, I know 6 people that I know. There's probably another 25 that back the whole town in any event that goes on. And we have them 5 or 6 every year. It is fabulous.
That's great.
You know, but when you're in a big community like St. Louis, there's so much going on. You don't, you know, a lot of people in St. Louis don't even go visit the Arch. You know,
Without a bulletproof vest.
it seems funny that they don't. But anyway, I'll end mine here. Go ahead and talk to somebody else.
So your prediction for the game tonight?
He said he had
I
no.
said I didn't even know there was a game. I had
Flip it,
no
boy.
idea.
Everybody knows there's a game.
I had no idea.
So that's why it's busy in town? I'm serious.
Yeah, there's, the Catholic school is playing against the public school tonight.
Oh.
So it's always a rival.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And I think they're playing over here in St. Genevieve.
They are.
We'd be running out of town.
Yeah. It'll be busy right now while they're at restaurants, but here in a little bit, everything will be over there.
Yeah.
Good to know.
No, you have your own voice.
Well, like you said, he wanted to come down here. I didn't, and I fought it bad. In fact, I wouldn't even have to come down, which was terrible. And now I love it. Oh, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Times have changed. We were in North St. Louis County, and the neighborhood has changed so bad.
Oh, for sure.
Like you're saying, you don't go anywhere with And I was just glad that all the children were raised and we were away from there. And the people down here are so friendly, so friendly. It seems like everybody's your friend. And it's just wonderful. I really like it now.
What's your name again? I'm sorry.
Barbara,
Barbara. Okay, thanks.
but it took me a long time. All my friends were up there. They all went to St. Charles. I was down here with nobody
Sure, that's an adjustment.
except him.
I did the same thing in my life. Told her we're moving. And she happened to be pregnant at the time. So she wasn't very happy about it either. Because we did the same thing. We transplanted a lot. We moved away from our family. I didn't know anybody down here. And I told her one day, we had this place, and I said, I got to go make a friend. Because I had nobody. So I got in my car, and I went down the road, and I seen this guy standing out in his driveway, and I pulled up and started talking to him, told him I just moved in and I needed some help. And he went with me, and that guy is my best friend to this day. That was over 20 some odd years ago.
Ah,
Yeah, but yeah, it's incredible.
that is incredible. That is.
Mostly, he was in the choir. It's in Agnes Catholic Church. And through that, we began to make friends. Through the choir, and then through their friends. So it's kind of snowballed.
Yeah,
And it's really nice.
that's great. And you guys?
Well, from different places.
Yeah.
My name's Rick. Last name's Haas. I'm not going to, I don't think. Okay. It's German for rabbit, by the way, or Alsatian. The family was
Alsatian.
German French, depending
Okay.
on the last war. Okay, that was based on.
Sure.
I'm from Farmington, which I'm getting to be an old guy. I was 28, 29, then something happened. Real quick. I mean,
Time work.
there it all sucks. I'm fighting it as best I can. So I've been as getting to be an old guy. You know, a lot of different places in my life. You know, I've been in the Dakotas and things like that. I've lived in the city, in St. Louis, long ago. Don't plan to go back. In Farmington, but primarily I've spent the last 32 years living nowhere, which was a trick because there was no town there. I was near her town, which is a big 365 people. Okay. This is Arm County, Ozarkian. So I settled in a farm there for the last 32 years. Okay. And I'm in Farmington. Farmington is basically my motel, is what it is. It's a nice motel town. It's clean, it's safe, and it's close enough to St. Louis, and it's close enough to the Ozarkian streams, it's close enough to the Mississippi. I'm a big water fan, okay? Originally I'm from Cape Girardeau, so I do appreciate the river. I have an appreciation, I think, for the river. Rather than my history where I've been around, I'm going to focus on what you're trying to do and where you're going, the river, okay? I would say, and I think you would agree, river towns have a special camaraderie between the towns. There's a feeling. You've been there, okay. The guys that will be fishing where the ferry is up here tonight about 11 o'clock, okay, are basically the same guys that are going to be around the old Honker's boat dock in Cape Girardeau fishing tonight around 11 o'clock. It would be like the guys down at Eames, Illinois doing that, and then the guys over at Commerce. You start to get the idea of this? Okay. I remember you're going to Cape. Cape now has a seawall.
Yeah.
Okay, to protect the town. At one time it didn't. So I got to see interesting things when I was young, like sandbags at the Woolworths downtown with the John boat going down the street, okay, during the floodwaters. The seawall has fixed that, mostly, okay. I remember when I was young, laying in bed at night, and I would hear the sound of the trains, which you probably hear here, okay, and the sounds of the boats, and you learn to tell the difference. And it's kind of special. It's kind of magic. I was raised on the river and boating on it and fishing it and all that type of thing, and water skiing on it a whole lot. Okay, the river. One thing I would say about the river, and you know the southern end pretty well. I would say it's magic. I would say it's magic. Okay, there is nothing like the land along the river, and I see it every time I kayak now. It's amazing. Okay, it's like no place else in the world. It is a different world. Those sandbars that come up to explore those, and I've been doing that lately with a friend that kayaks who is in his retirement became an archaeologist, and he's involved with this area and some of the historical work. This area is working towards becoming a national park. Okay, and we get out on those bars, and it's amazing what we find: ancient, old things. Okay. Been along the river, and there's things, I was trying to think some of the things I thought was really magic. I remember things like one time, I was on my dirt bike at the time, and this is near Cape, and was going through, I was on the Illinois side. I was, be careful being in Illinois. But I remember seeing this whole area which had these trees which would have encompassed maybe the whole size of downtown of here. And they were all dead and covered with kudzu. You're from down south, you know what kudzu is, the plant that ate us out.
Right.
And here it is like a big web net, and these trees are like, 50, 75, 100 feet in the air, and you're just seeing the sunlight come through that kudzu covering. To see things like that, and there's sandbars on that river when they're out that are miles long, miles wide. Just, it always seemed magic and always special. And the people that lived around it, much the same. So, that's what I would offer, it's magic. And I'd be interested in your opinion to the southern end of that thing. Ever since I was young, I wanted to go down the river. A raft, a boat, something like that, okay? And have not done that. Maybe I'll get that done.
Yeah.
It's a bucket list thing. And I always thought,
It's on my bucket list too.
I always thought I'd take a boat down, go all the way, get into the Gulf and come around. I don't see why.
Well, stay tuned. We'll be writing about it. So yeah.
I've met a lot of people out in the river doing that type of thing. Last year, I remember there was a raft coming down there from Australia.
Oh, the people who kayak the river are amazing. I'm thankful for my legs that I can run, and that I'm running along the riverside, the many miles that we have to go, because my upper body strength is not that. We've kayaked some along the river, but I'm not quite ready to kayak the length of the river.
It goes downstream.
It does. You could float. You could float, right? Sure. But
Maybe an inner tube.
maybe an inner tube, right? I'll raft it. Yeah.
When I water skied in it, and you remember certain things in the river though that when you're getting ready to get up on the skis and things go bump on the bottom of your skis, you want to go like, you don't want to think about, okay, that's either a large tree or a giant gar, or it could be a dead cow. Do we really want to know? Okay. So I'll just stop.
You'll concede to your wife now, yes.
Yeah, and
Lady friend.
she's a native. Don't know. She's a native of Minnesota.
Yeah.
So
I was born in Deer River and moved to Illinois, Rockford, Illinois when I was 3. Dad had been working away from home, and he got a good job there, so we moved the family to Rockford, Illinois. And from there I moved to Annapolis, Missouri. And but every summer when I was a kid, we went back to Minnesota and us kids spent the summer in Minnesota. And every year I'd walk across the Mississippi, and now every 3 years my family has a family reunion there at Bemidji, which is about 19 miles from the mouth of the Mississippi. So every 3 years now I walk across the Mississippi. And, when I was a kid, just 2 steps and I was across. Now I actually have to walk.
It's a few more steps, yeah.
Yes, and it's gotten deeper over the years.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really neat.
So it must be kind of a little bit of a shock to your system, the river here versus the river there.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were down there by the river earlier, and I said to him, I said, boy, I says, you know, you look at this and it's hard to believe I walked across the Mississippi just a couple months ago. You know?
For sure, for sure. Yeah.
But Paul Bunyan and Babe have always been my heroes.
Very awesome.
I got my wife, you were talking about St. Charles, my wife, Mary, she's in St. Louis tonight. She always, and my wife had a really rough childhood with dealing with different things with her dad. But she always tells the story, her grandma and grandpa had a river cabin up in, it's called Washertown. Yeah, it was on the Missouri River up there.
Right.
And she always tells, and she's had a few pictures of this cabin on stilts, because that's how they did it, because the river, when it got down,
Sure.
she has a lot of really good memories of the river, and going there with grandma and grandpa and all her cousins. They spend weekends down there, and she tells there was a dock there, and she remembers getting a bath in the river as a little girl. I mean, they were little girls. But a lot of, those are really good memories for her, you know, and her too. We both grew up in the same neighborhood, you know, so it's kind of cool. You know?
Yeah.
They've cleaned the river up a lot over the years. You wouldn't know that unless you had been in it years ago. It definitely had a gamey smell to it. I'm serious, a gamey smell, and you just, you know, you accepted that. That was part of it. And it doesn't now. They have amazingly cleaned it up. They're careful of not putting sewage in the river. It's being processed. Most of the water, they're not even taking water out of the river for most towns now. They're taking it out of
Don't go to the
groundwater.
Rock River and
Yeah, yeah.
there.
I can attest to that. I worked on it, this will be 42 years on the river. I remember when I first started, it was just, ooh.
Yeah, and so you don't have signs anymore in St. Louis in the bars that says flush twice, kid needs the water. You know?
Yeah.
But the river, I think has so much to say, you know, because I always remember the river. When I see the river, it takes me back to all my family, you know, because down to my dad. When I was younger, we'd go down to this track down in Bloomfield, and there's old town that was gone. It's just diminished, but the buildings were still there.
That's Bricky's.
Bricky's, yeah. The town was, you know, the buildings are still there, the shells. But I
Yeah.
always just wondered what it would be like when it was, you know, really.
That was a happening place.
Yes, you know what I mean? So I even got inside there, you know.
Oh,
But
yeah.
they took it all down now, but it was really, you know, I always tried to think of, you know, what was going on at this particular time. And it always just makes me go back to, you know, the river does make you just, it's like time.
It is. It's constantly changing, and you see that over time. And with each community we've been in, the differences and the similarities, and you wonder what is the future of the river, and not just the river itself, but the region around the river, really, the communities, because that's really what we're listening for.
One thing I would kind of offer to throw a monkey wrench, thanks, throw a monkey wrench into what you're looking at here, and I don't mean that literally, but you're aware that in Missouri and with river people that we connect the Missouri and the Mississippi
That's right.
quite together.
Yeah, we came through St. Charles and ran along the Missouri River for a little bit before we reconnected with the Mississippi, you know, and had some conversations around the Missouri River and what's been happening with that river. Obviously, that's a major artery, and some people think that is the headwaters up that way. But still, I mean, all of the watershed, it's not just the river, it's the watershed. And all the regions that are connected to the river, and all the small towns, really, in this part of the country, in Middle America, are feeling a change. I don't want to say what that change is, but they're feeling a change.
It's had a change before. I just finished reading about the New Madrid earthquake. And as you head south, you're going to go by part of connected Missouri over here, part of Illinois called Kaskaskia, which basically was impacted by the New Madrid earthquake when the Mississippi changed directions. And that's always been interesting. So we've had to put up with, a part of Illinois and Missouri.
Sure. Yeah, there's always been change. Change is constant. And just understanding what the current change is doing to this part of the United States and what role that has in the current conversation, that it should have a role, right?
The major structural, I will say this and I'll shut up. The major structural difference I see on the river, and I'd be interested what you think about this too, experience with, that I see is a proliferation of rock dikes. There's a lot of rock dikes out there that weren't there before. That narrows the channel. It takes care of some of the problems with having a good, reliable channel for the boats, but there's a lot of rock dikes, and I pay attention to it when I'm in a kayak because I don't want to really hit these rocks.
So do we.
Sure.
We like it though. I work in the maintenance business. I like it when they hit dikes.
We love
Damage
it.
done, we need to fix
I
it.
love to stand there and watch the barges.
Now, we haven't met you yet. What's your name?
Oh, I'm Kathy.
Kathy?
I came just for the listening.
Just for the listening. Okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised out on Highway 61, which is in the Zell area, more or less. But I've been gone a long time. I went to SEMO, then I went overseas to work over there, and then I ended up in Massachusetts for 38 years.
My gosh.
And then I came back.
Okay.
Yeah, my family's all here.
You went to SEMO?
I went to SEMO.
What year?
Back in 1960, 61.
Well, I'm a classmate.
What brought you back to St. Genevieve?
Well, my family's all here.
Okay.
I got 7 brothers and sisters left here with all the nieces and nephews in Go Valley. They're all Valleyites.
Go Valley!
A bold prediction. Who's going to win tonight?
I don't know, it was a 29 and 26. They won 29 games and the other team won 20.
It's very close, yeah. It's almost
Yeah.
50%.
Since 1956. I was still in high school.
Well, wonderful. Well, I think we have a couple of things we can share with you.
What about Sandra? We need to talk to Sandra.
Oh, you're right. That is a very good call because we've been talking about that. We don't know Sandra's story.
Well, I'll give it to you in a nutshell because, like many other people, I've moved around, but I'm from here originally. I'm from St. Genevieve County in Bloomsdale, St. Agnes Parish. Went to Valley High School, so go Valley. I gave my children a choice though, and they went to St. Jen, so for a while I had to cheer for St. Jen.
Oh, split.
But right after college, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and then got married and moved to Lexington, Kentucky, 2 beautiful parts of the country. But in the 95 flood, so twice a year we would bring the kids and come home. And in the 95 flood, I was taking my daughter on a road trip to visit my parents, and we got to a point where the whole interstate was underwater, and I was just desperate, to see my parents, and they were actually, parked on the other side of the water, and there was an 18-wheeler that came up beside us, and you should never do this, but I flagged him down and I said, "That's my dad in that pickup truck over there. Could you give me a ride over to?" So I got into the 18-wheeler with my little baby daughter, and we rode through the water so I could get there and go back home again and take my daughter home. And anyway, so at that time I started thinking about moving home, and everybody wants to move home at some point. But when I had my children, I'd be coming home to see my parents, the rest of my family, and my grandparents who were then in their 90s. I started to feel this sense of urgency that I needed to get home and I needed to pull my share. Everybody in our family like every Sunday, we were at my grandparents' house for dinner, which was lunch, you know. And we spent the whole day there together as a family and gathered around and, you know, watched Lawrence Welk in the evening together and everything.
Red Skelton too.
Yeah, Red Skelton, yeah, Flip Wilson. So I started feeling this sense inside that I needed to get home and I needed to be, you know, helping my parents and checking on my grandparents and, you know, giving my nieces and nephews a ride to school. You know, those are the little things that you do as part of a family. And so we moved back here in the late 90s. So it's been 20 years and, you know, my children went to the same grade school that I went to. It was a good education and I gave them the choice and they chose the public school, but won't hold that against them. So now they're grown and gone and I get to express my love for this community by being the director of tourism. So
It's great. It's great. Do you think your kids will ever come back?
I hope so. My son is in Florida now, and I just went through the, you know, trauma of will they evacuate or won't they? And they did,
Right.
thank goodness, and they're fine. But it's a long way away, and you know, I can't begrudge them making the same choice that I made. You know, they moved away, but I feel pretty sure that time will draw them back at some point.
Yeah.
And I do have one other funny river story because my father, when I was growing up, was a big farmer and rancher, and we have land in Bloomsdale. Well, at the time, he also owned property over near Modoc, Illinois. And so he took the ferry back and forth all the time, and he was usually one of the first people going across in the morning, one of the last people coming over at night. And there were 3 children in my family, and I've always been an early bird, so he would come down the hallway of our bedrooms and go, "Who wants to ride with me today?" And I would always like be up, running down the hall, ready to go. And so I would ride with him across the river on the ferry. And, you know, sometimes I'd ride with him out on the tractor, but then I found like people to play with over there. So sometimes at the end of the day, he'd be tired to get, you know, his truck and he'd ride across on the ferry, make the last run, he'd get home and my mom would say, "Where's Sandra?" Well, so they'd call and, you know, I'd have already eaten dinner with the people. They're like, "Oh, she's right here. We fed her. She could spend the night," you know. And my mom's like, "How many days are you going to leave her over there?"
Oh my God!
It took me a couple of days in a row. But I loved it, you know. Like, who doesn't love it? To be able to spend
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So at one point, he was taking the ferry so much, he started learning how to drive it from the guy that was the ferry pilot. His name was Bud, and he would let him drive it across, and then he'd pay him to come over. And then Bud had to go down to the Chester Bridge and come back.
Oh,
So yeah, to drive the ferry back in the morning.
just because he wanted to have access whenever he needed it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Worked out. So.
Wow.
So I've been on the ferry that you took a lot.
A lot. A lot. Yeah. It
I've
sounds
never
like
been
it.
on, but we're planning a trip to go across the,
Oh, it's kind of
see
neat.
the old towns there and then come back from Chester.
Yeah.
You're aware that you're doing this just in time, just very shortly. This ferry wasn't running because of high water.
Oh, yeah.
The bridge at Chester, the approaches were knocked out by water, and so it was a cake. You couldn't have got across anywhere from St. Louis.
We heard, yeah, we've been in touch with everyone, all our partners like Sandra for months and months and have been aware of the situation.
If you started a month earlier, you couldn't have crossed. 'Cause
Nope.
It really just opened up again.
It was the perfect timing, so we, you know, fingers crossed, yeah. Well, again, thank y'all all so much and for sharing, and we hope you'll continue to share. So we're going to share with you our contact information, our website, our Facebook, also my email and phone number, a postcard where if you want to send it back to us and share more, you can, or you can keep it, or you can share it with someone else. If you have someone that you think might want to share a story with us, that'd be lovely. You know, we're just really interested in hearing more about people's lives along this region. and what is going on here. And we are so happy to hear from you tonight. So, yeah, thank you again. If you have any more questions, obviously feel free to ask them. We have 60 more days down the river. And we have many more days after that to process and absorb and work through all this material before it comes into being in a book and other types of iterations of artistic work. So we continue to appreciate your feedback and input and sharing with us along the way.
I'm curious at what points on the river, you know, south of here, you're going to stop at Obviously, Cape.
Yep. So we go from
Illinois.
we go into Cairo. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We are.
You'll find that interesting.
We sure will. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Carol, yeah, you'll wonder where Carol went.
Yeah.
When you see Carol, remember one little interesting fact about it.
Okay.
That during the Civil War, remember that? I actually wasn't alive during the Civil War. Okay. During the Civil War, Carol was the second most fortified city in the United States.
Wow.
It was that involved down there.
Yeah, we've heard. I mean, I've been to Cairo before, and
It died.
It's yeah, and we've heard a lot when we were in East St. Louis about people who are connected to some folks in Cairo and the same struggles that they're experiencing, similar struggles. So we're.
But Cairo would be another Chicago because it was a point of two rivers. Made a lot of sense. But
Yeah. Yeah.
where are you going to stop after Cairo? I'm curious. Memphis will be.
Cairo, we go through Kentucky. So we have Wycliffe, Columbus, and Hickman in Kentucky. Then we go on to several communities in Tennessee. It's Ridgely and Tiptonville and Ripley and Covington and Fort Pillow, and then eventually Memphis, and then West Memphis. We cross over into Arkansas. Right there, she's got the list.
I assume you'll be going to Vicksburg as well.
We are going to Vicksburg. Yes, we are.
You know about the Carol there?
The what is it?
Carol. Well, here to show you're not you're a local. You can act like you're a local. It's not Cairo, even though it's spelled the same.
Oh, the Carol.
But there is a boat on the riverfront down in Vicksburg called the Carol.
Oh, okay.
Which they found in the Yazoo River not too long ago, that the Southern boys, God bless them, Southern boys, had torpedoed during the siege of Vicksburg.
Oh.
And they found it in the mud, and it was mostly intact, and it's down on the waterfront on the Mississippi in Vicksburg.
How interesting.
And if you were in St. Louis, one of the major old bridges, there's the Eads Bridge. The guy that built that, named Eads,
Yep,
the one
Eads.
that built the boat that's now.
Okay,
Vicksburg.
yeah. We crossed over the Eads Bridge and you know a little bit about Eads. So yeah, we will be in Vicksburg and further down from Vicksburg, you know, we'll eventually get into Natchez into Vidalia, eventually down to, you know, once we're in Louisiana, we, you know, go through all the usual suspects, Morganza and St. Francisville and Baton Rouge and St. Gabriel and all the river parishes, Convent and Norco and Reserve, and then we hit Kenner and New Orleans and St. Bernard Parish. We're going to be in Violet, and then we get into Plaquemines Parish, which is our final leg. And we're going to be in several small towns in Plaquemines Parish to really absorb the story of what's disappearing in terms of the land and the land loss, you know, and the coastal erosion there. And they're at the mouth of the river. So we'll be there for several days. Yeah.
You have a busy itinerary.
We do. We do. We are chock full until November 5th, and then we'll take a big sigh of relief. Yeah.
Museum down there. We went to Tunica, so we were looking for something to do besides gambling.
Oh,
Museum will open, Memphis, I don't know what city
Yeah.
Right up there.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-daughter-in-law was from DeRitter.
Okay, DeRitter. It's not far from my
Her father
hometown, yeah.
still lives there.
Okay, yeah. I'm familiar with it, yeah.
We in Missouri, we're still trying to forgive the squareheads for what they did to Jesse.
Okay, roll.
When you're in Cape, you would probably want to go eat at Broussard's.
Broussard's? Okay,
It's a
we'll,
Cajun restaurant.
okay, we'll make a note of it,
Downtown
yeah.
Main Street, can't miss it.
Okay.
Big alligator sign on the front. There you go.
Awesome, very good.
Have you seen the Piasaw bird?
Have we seen the what?
Piasaw bird.
Upriver from here.
No.
You never heard of the Piasaw birds?
No, what is that?
Okay, it's a painting of a bird on the cliffs of Alton, Illinois.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you come down the River Road.
We missed Alton, we were in the other
On
side.
the other side.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, so,
Well, there's an interesting story that I run across. Now, you're familiar with Cahokia.
yep.
Okay, we were up at the mounds with my family, and this lady was in the museum, and she looked like Indiana Jones' girlfriend. She had boots with white socks up to here, shorts, khaki shorts, and a white blouse and a red scarf, and her hair was bright red. And she was telling my daughter and grandkids that her family are of the Indians that were at Cahokia. And they were searching, her husband was a professor, and they were searching, and they come to the mounds up there, to the curator, to find some papers to prove that the Piasaw bird, they were painted by the Indians. When Joliet and Marquette came down the river, they came down as far as St. Genevieve. I don't know how far they came down, but they did see the Piasaw bird, and they mentioned it. So whenever they came down, this was in the 1500s or something like that, it was painted on there. Well, these professor and his wife, they're trying to prove the Piasaw bird does not look like a bird. It looks like a dragon. It's got big teeth, it's got horns, it's got wings, it's got 4 legs, and it's got a forked tail. You're familiar with the Piasaw bird. It doesn't look like a bird. So they want to prove that it was not painted by the Indians, it was painted by the Chinese. There was an admiral, his name was Zhang He, 80 years before Christopher Columbus. And he was from China. And this dynasty had sent this armada out. His flagship was 400 foot long. Christopher Columbus, 70 years later, his flagship was 240 foot long. Now, the Zhang He had an armada here, 300 and some ships. 3 ships carry nothing but pure water, drinking water. The ships housed 28,000 men, army or whatever it was, but it's documented. All these things are fact, and they're trying to prove that as he traveled the world, and he only stopped once he died, the emperor or whoever, the dynasty decided to burn the whole fleet and build their wall because they needed to protect it from the hordes of people who were trying to come in. But anyway, he contends that this emperor, this here admiral, they documented him, he was in the Atlantic Ocean. But whether he came down the Mississippi and painted these paints, which they're trying to say that the Indians didn't have that
Vision, yeah.
of the Orientals' idea of
A dragon.
Yeah.
See, we don't have, as a bird, I don't think of dragons with teeth and 4 legs and a forked tail. But the Oriental, they
Did.
all their scrimshaw and all these other things are dragon.
How interesting.
But then you read the other critics, because you always have those who believe this. And if you get on the computer, you'll find out there are critics. And they were from right here in Bonne Terre, this couple. And we met them over there. And until I got on the computer. But it's a fabulous story. Here, if we could discover that the Chinese came down here 70 years before Christopher Columbus and painted this
Dragon.
songbird.
I had a redheaded girlfriend and all probably was related to that.
Oh, Oh, thank you, yeah.
That was good.
Good to see you again,
Good to
Mayor.
see you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Paul.
nice to
Oh,
see
so
you.
nice, yeah. So nice to meet you, yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, awesome.
Okay.